Thank you, Emily. And I am very grateful for Eduphoria for giving us this opportunity just to share kind of where we went with this process when we started going into this last year and kind of where we've gone from now, as well as some kind of tips that we have and just kind of things, ideas and resources that we have as well. My contact information is at the end too. So if there's anything that we don't share out tomorrow that you have questions about or something, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. Feel like the more kids that we're able to kind of share this with, the better. So definitely reach out if y'all have any questions. Today we're going to go over just some really basic things that we've said, how we got started, how we kind of got the ball rolling and what steps we took in our district, trends that we've seen within contents, how we create our assessments now within our own district for like our district assessments, and then just kind of our tips and tools for creating those within Eduphoria as well. This is me. I'm Kim Pena. I'm the Assessment and Accountability Specialist at Hays CISD. We are a district located just south of Austin. We have around 22,000 students currently, and we're kind of always growing. We're kind of where people move when Austin becomes too costly, so we're always booming. This is my 12th year in education and 12th year in our district. I've been in this district as a teacher, as an instructional coach, and now as the assessment specialist. When I kind of came into this position, we weren't even doing online Eduphoria. So like there weren't even online tests. And as you guys know, the last few years have really kind of thrust us into that. So that's kind of where we came about when we were moving into these pieces. Tara and Emily are kind of my helpers with Eduphoria. So they're going to be our guys that are watching the chat and the Q&A. So, and stopping me if we need to stop on all of those. So I'm super thankful to them and grateful for all they've done. They're also my go-to when I need things with Eduphoria as well. I often have to apologize to Emily for my questions. So one of the things when we talk about these content and language supports and the content clarifiers is what kind of supports they are. So one question I kind of want to start off with today is, what is a support that you use every day? What is something that is a support with you in how you read the news or how you do life or how you kind of organize your life? Please share with you in the chat what is your kind of most common support that you use. It could be a person, it can be a thing. Maybe let's keep it PG. To-do lists, planners. I love this planner. I'm a big list person too. So I love planners. Siri, I love that too. And I love coffee. They're all doing great for these. Oh, Post-it notes. That's my boss. His entire desk is covered in Post-it notes. I love the Google everything. That's a great one. I'm going to actually show you guys some things that I've transported from Google today. So that's perfect. I love all the coffees. I'm a very big coffee person. So I love those. Great answers, you guys. So one of the ways that I kind of established this within our district is these are supports that we are now capable of giving students and providing for students. And one big thing that I've kind of had to share with teachers especially is not every kid is eligible for these supports. Not every kid needs them. Not every single person has to have the same supports as another. And so it's really kind of finding where you see these supports with your TEKs, with your content, and then with the students. So it kind of is a bit different kind of pronged approach. This is kind of, if you're in our last one, this is always what I go to for my image connecting to these supports. I feel like this image when I was a teacher was utilized these first two panels all the time. How do we go from equality to equitable? And then I saw this last one when I was an instructional coach about how do we make our content just accessible to everyone where they are. And so our idea with teachers was teachers want to live in this last image where you are making your content so accessible that there's no barriers for anybody wherever they are. But, and this is what I always tell our teachers, I live in testing world now and I can't get rid of the STAR wall, the EOC wall. I can't take it away. So the idea with these content language supports, these content clarifiers, is going from vision like box 1 to box 2, helping those kids be able to access that content and show their knowledge and show kind of their understanding in ways that are accessible to them and making those tests more equitable. So where do you start? This was a big issue when we first kind of heard about the content clarifiers and we kind of started looking at what these were. I could tell right away these were going to be a big game changer. And in our district, we have 2 people in the assessment department, me and my boss. I am the Eduphoria like world that I work in. And so I knew that I kind of had to take the start. I kind of had to take the lead. And so I started first by calling everybody. I called TEA, I called Eduphoria, I called other districts, and I said, how do I make a content clarifier? Like, what is it? Tell me how I choose it. How do I do this? And I pretty much got a lot of, that's Eduphoria was like, hey, we're not going to dive into the content, like that's on teachers and districts. That's not kind of their lane. TEA blatantly told us that they do have trainings that they provide their staff, but they're all internal and they were not something that they were willing to share. So I kind of just did all I could do. And I went and dove into, at the time, the ETS test. At the time, there was 2017 and 18 that had the content language supports built in. And I just started digging around in them. And I'm going to show you guys kind of what I saw. Currently, there's the Canvas practice now that you can do. They have 18 through 21 currently. I will say, and I think I did this in a different slide, they have 18 through 21 English. They have 19 through 21 Spanish. So there is no 18 for like SWAR that has these supports. You can go look at the test, but it doesn't have the supports built in. And then we kind of looked at making the content teams. And I'll kind of delve into this a little bit deeper in later parts of this presentation. But the content teams to me are a huge step in this process. This was not something we started with. I started with just me, myself, and I. And I wish I had started with full content teams, because as we get to the part where we're looking at trends across the contents, it is so beneficial to have experts at that point. Having experts that look at these tests and understand the TEKS. I was an instructional coach for social studies. I was a social studies teacher. When I look at a social studies test, it makes more sense to me in a different way, knowing those TEKS and understanding those TEKS and those processing TEKS and readiness TEKS than a science test does, because I don't understand all of those processes. That's not where kind of my expertise lies. And so it's just a different kind of world to look at it from that expert view. And so I definitely, the content teams, and like I said, we'll talk more about that later, but that's really a big piece of the starting. Having a content team, whether it means specialists, coordinators, whether you bring in admin that have some specialty in content, or whether you just bring in expert teachers. You have experts in your district, regardless of your size. There are teachers that know their content, back and forth and know their TEKS. Bring them in. Building those content teams is a big starting piece. I'm going to show you guys kind of my beginning pieces. So when I started off, I went to what is now the practice and release test. I go to them very often because I am still working right now through 2021 and doing the same kind of starting point. So I go into that practice test, and this is that link for that practice test. And I pull up, and I'm going to show you guys what these look like. I pull up one of these PDFs. This is just straight from that TEA release test site. So this is the 2017 English one. This one's not even there anymore. And I would literally have this on like a split screen, or if you have dual monitors and you're fancy, you can do it on the dual monitors. And I would go through each test, and I would make notes if they had pre-reads. I would make notes. And so I use the highlighting feature of PDF in Adobe to create these kind of supports. I would list out what these supports were, and I would create PDF versions of all the tests that I've gone through. Right now, I've gone through all 17, 18, and 19, and I'm working on 2021. Some of them are very obvious, but it helped me see trends. When they say, editing questions that have those, how would you change this? They always pop up here. This would show the sentences 26 through 28 with the changes in bold. Anytime we have the pre-reads, I put them in specific colors, and I'm going to jump real quick right now to the reading passages so y'all can see kind of what those look like. And I'm going to make this a little bit easier to see too. But I just went through tests, every single one, and made notes. And I made kind of use this to just start us. This just gave me a view of how TEA does this. So if there was a pop-up clarifier here, I would list what it was. So you can say, so artificially made, like someone made them. If there were pictures, I just put it in green. That was kind of my color coding system. My pink was my pre-reads. My green is pictures across the contents. Blue is if they're going to give a definition of something. And for other contents mainly, but some ELAR, purple is my rollover. So if I have a rollover, you'll see it in purple too. So I literally created these, and this is still, like I said, where I start. So you can see, like in this question here, there were pop-ups, and I marked what those pop-ups were so I can know, so that and I'll show you kind of where this really helps our district later on. But this at first was really to just get me an understanding of what these were. I went by content. So I did all math, and then I did all ELAR, and then I did all, the science and then the social studies. And I kind of went through it in that way, so that like when I was in the math, I was trying to kind of take notes of what trends am I seeing just in math? What trends am I seeing just in science? And you will see a progression. There are, for example, in 17, if you had a question that had sentences, like which sentence best describes this, they had pop-ups that told you which paragraphs they were from. If you look at 19 and 21, they have created that as part of the test now. Every student gets to see that. So they have made kind of trends that have grown, that they've made changes that impact testing in general. So it's a really kind of useful tool. Again, all of those are their definitions, and I would mark their definitions. And then these were those rollovers. So they could see like what the rollover was, and we would take notes of those. So really, if you've never created these, if you really just have a basic understanding of what they are, that is my first step for you. Go in, jump in, play with those practice tests, look at them, create those PDFs where it really gives you a visual of what does that look like. The next one we're going to look at is those trends. So like I told you guys, I've jumped in again. I've done 3 full years now. I'm moving into my 4th of those different examples that we have. 17 is no longer up. Cambian did not include it when they came over from ETS, but I was able to get those from ETS before that site changed. This again goes back to the team. Utilizing the team really gives you that understanding that you may not have. When I first brought the rollovers of math to our math specialist, and our math team specifically was our hardest online testing cell. They just had to have that piece of paper to work out those problems. It was just not feasible to move online. No matter how many times we kept telling them that we were going online, Texas is going online, somehow math really felt like they were going to be the ones that TU would be like, no, you can stay on paper. And so we just had a lot of pushback from math. When I showed them the rollovers, the images that come with the math, the formulas being referenced, it was a game changer to them in a way that I did not expect. It changed their mentality towards online tests so drastically. They were completely bought in. And I cannot tell you how much I wish I would have included them in that process from the get-go. How much I wish I would have had them be a part of that process of going through those practice tests from the beginning. Because that insight to those teaks, to the process that they had in seeing those things was just so powerful that I wish it would have happened from the get-go. That's kind of if I could go back and change, I would start with creating that team and including that team in this process throughout. So I definitely think that I just can't emphasize enough, create that team of your content specialists in some way. Here are math trends. I'm going to go over the trends we've seen as well as some content or some specifics that we've pulled out as well. In math, 80 to 85% of the tests have supports built in. Rollovers happen more in math than any other content. Images are usually used on specific items or experiences. So if you have something talking about a carnival, sometimes food, all of those different pieces within that, you're going to see with the images. A lot of times, like there was an example on a 2021 one today that I looked at that talked about a water tank. There was an image of a water tank. So really anything that is an experience that maybe a kid can't reference in their head right away, they're going to give you an image. Gardens, a lot of times they'll do images of different or trees or things like that. Reference chart are always connected. So if there is a reference chart, my eldest is in 3rd grade right now. He calls it his cheat sheet. He was like, yeah, my math test wasn't that bad because I got a cheat sheet with it. The reference charts are pulled in and referenced throughout the test. If they have something where they need the slope, they're going to pull that formula. If they have something where they need a volume, they're going to pull that formula for them. And there's common language. So again, as I was going through these, I looked at trends. And here's my common language trend. In every math test from 3rd grade through algebra, from 17 to 21, if it says represents, it clarifies it as shows. So one thing that we do, because within our district, and I'll take you guys through this in the process in a second, one thing that we do if we have a question that we're using that to not star released, So either someone wrote that question, or we used it from a different source. We have Problematic for some of our math courses, and then we also have TEKS resource system for some of our math courses, and we have access to those banks. These are the words I'm looking for first. I'm looking for it saying something was shaded. I'm looking for it saying there's a model of something. I'm looking for it saying that something was recorded. I'm looking for these keywords to start. So when I'm looking at those sentences that someone wrote for this math test, I'm going to start by looking at where are the obvious ones. And to me, these are the obvious ones. These are the words that we've seen throughout the years specifically to math. I was telling Emily, because we were talking about if Eduphoria could create like a bank of content clarifiers. And my first comment was, I love that idea, but I need it by content. I need math to have a bank. I need science to have a bank, because in science, model might say something completely different. Represents might say something different. So it's like, I need them, but I need them by content, because that's really where you see the power in these supports. ELAR has literally the most overall supports per test. And I'm going to share my most recent great idea from an instructional coach in our district, but led to more work for us. I'm going to show you guys later as well. There is a great data view that Eduphoria just released that is the Content Clarifier usage view. And it shows you how many times on average kids on your campus clicked on a content clarifier. So for this one test, how many times did they click on them? So we were kind of showing our campuses as we've been pushing this year, hey, you can even look at this. And a lovely instructional coach said, this is so cool, but I don't know what this means. If I have an ELAR test and it says they clicked on it 80 times, is that good? Like, how many supports were there? So I went in and counted a bunch of our tests and counted how many supports we had. ELAR in our English 1, English 2, which we have now combined in our district, so they're similar to STAR with the revising and editing combined with their reading, had over 150 supports on each one. So ELAR, mainly because those reading passages, by and far has the most supports per test. 80 to 90% of their questions have supports built in as well. The pre-reads, if you haven't looked at the pre-reads, are a complete game changer. They really give those students a summary of the passage they're about to read and build in kind of backward knowledge and just kind of that basic understanding of what they're about to read. They use images and animations in the reading passages. They don't use images in their questions unless they're referring to an image that was within the reading, such as like a map or a picture that was, just included in the reading passage itself, or sometimes like a chart that was included. But those will be in those questions. Otherwise, the images are really just for those reading passages. They do use rollovers not as frequently as pop-ups, and they have those definitions. Because the majority of their pop-ups and clarifying terms are based on their content of their reading passages, they don't really have a lot of common content clarifiers. However, they do have this literary term definition piece within these supports. And these definitions are the exact same from 3rd grade to English 1. Anytime that they put mood on there, they're going to define it in the exact same way, or simile, or theme, or alliteration, or tone, anytime. So what we did was we created these common kind of trends that we saw. We created these charts, we blew them up into posters, and we made them available for any of the teachers from 3rd grade up that were interested or wanted them in their classroom. So now our English teachers are using these definitions as they're in their teaching, as a part of what they're teaching, and as a part of like a kind of anchor chart of a word wall. So if I'm taking a test, I can still go and look at this and see that, because when I go to take my EOC or my STAR, it's going to be provided for me. It's going to be there. So that's kind of a big piece that we saw within this. And we've kind of created those based on that. For science has 90% of test questions with supports built in. Again, pop-ups are the most common, but sometimes they do have rollovers. They're much less frequent than math. Images are used specifically in their pop-ups for science-specific items, such as beakers, or to create more reference. So if they have like a food web, they're going to create the, like, show that food web again with like things in bold. So they might use an image they already created, but make it like more useful and kind of an added visual support within that. Just like math, their reference charts are referenced, specifically like if you have your periodic table, we'll pull those up. Any kind of formula that would be on a reference chart for 8th grade is going to be a part of that as well. They have more pop-ups in their answer choices than they actually do in their questions. So it's really clarifying what those students' options are in different ways for science. And a big part of that goes, apparently, again, bring in those experts with their processing teaks. So their processing teaks, specifically ones that scaffold within science, are used a lot within those pop-ups of those answer choices. And they do have, again, common terms. So again, 5th grade, 8th grade bio, you're going to see these same terms anytime. Anytime you have a procedure, it's going to clarify for steps. Anytime it says a student recorded observations, they wrote what they saw, or they write what they see, depending on the way it's used. Anytime it says they made an inference, they made a conclusion. Every single time, and we're talking throughout those years on all the ones we looked at, that's kind of what we looked at. Did we see this one on 5th grade? Okay, did we see it again on 8th or bio? Did we see it on all 3? So that's kind of where we created these to kind of help with that understanding of that common language and those common trends. And last but never least, because it is my favorite, is social studies. Social studies has the most supports per question. So when we looked at it there, I believe it was 8th grade, and I want to say it was 19, it might have been 18. There were something like 44 questions on the STAR. Every single question had supports built in. Every single question had pop-ups or had rollovers or had some type of support. One of the most powerful ones they use with the rollovers is shortened excerpts. They will reword to make it more simple language and a little easier to understand for those students, which in social studies, if you've ever looked at those tests, they're a beast. They're like another reading test in and of themselves. They do the rollovers sometimes for answer choices, and very rarely, and not often, but sometimes for questions as well. Their images are really only through their pop-ups. And their images are not as common as the science images. They're really only to reference specific things when they feel like they'd be the most useful. Their pop-ups that are just their simplifying, clarifying language are the most useful and the most common. And again, we found some commonalities between 8th grade and US history that we saw again every time that we would see settle, it meant to live in. Every time you saw debt, it was money owed. Troops were soldiers, like specific little ones here. Part that would have been some content, but part that aren't. And that's another kind of piece of where you look at where are they testing these things. For example, if we're talking about manifest destiny, or we're talking about expansion, they may not clarify it there. If they're talking about it in like the colonial era, they may clarify it there. So it's also kind of where does that content fit for social studies, which makes it a little bit more tricky. But it still kind of was a good place for us to help our teachers and our instructional coaches start by just looking at these commonalities. I've added in here, and if you looked at that last presentation that we did, feel free to just skip over these. I just added some really common views so you can see if you aren't aware of what they look like, or you aren't aware of kind of what they are, the pop-ups as well as the TEA guidelines for them, the rollovers, as well as those guidelines for them as well. And then the pre-reads, as well as like those guidelines for them. Before we get into really the nitty gritty of creating, Emily and Terry, were there any questions or anything we needed to stop and answer?
No, everything is going smoothly.
Great. Okay, so in our district, like I told you guys, I am the specialist. I create our district test. And we have a couple steps that we do within this. We bring in teams. We have content coordinators that bring in teams of teachers and instructional coaches over the summer to really review assessments that were there in the past and kind of, is that still applicable to what we're doing? So looking at our district curriculum and our district resources to identify which TEKs need to be assessed and when. So we look at our year at a glances, which are our YAGs, our pacing calendars, and our curriculum. We identify the highly tested TEKs, organized by what that grade level is, their content, pulling in those TEA blueprints, pulling in from different resources where you can find what your highly tested TEKs are, and creating those assessments to really review and edit those, bring in new things. and we utilize the STAR and EOC release test. I like them to stay within the boundaries of what I already have. We changed a lot, for example, this year of our ELAR testing, because we now had samples that already had those content language supports. But it's kind of, they're open. We have people that use passages from 2013. We have people that use passages from TEAC's resource system, or from HMH is one of our literary curriculums. Like, they'll pull in from all over the place. And that's kind of their freedom, is to kind of create the best assessment that they possibly can. We then go through it with our coordinators, as well as our, like myself, to make sure it is a viable and useful assessment. And then we kind of had to look at those plans. How will they create their plans and submit their plans? And I know a lot of you said Google, we use Google for that. So I create folders and they submit those plans to us. We look at who creates the supports, and that's where that team of experts come in. Once we have that assessment there and kind of just laid out, we have our experts come in and be like, okay, what questions have supports that we've gotten from TEA? What questions need them? How do we make them accessible for teachers? We make them accessible for our teachers in our district through Eduphoria, as well as through PDFs that I reformat so that they look a little more user-friendly, so they can use those for their planning and for their reflection pieces afterwards. A big thing to think about as you're moving forward in your district is, how do you communicate those plans? When I got this position, there was no system for creating assessments. There was no system for teacher input. There was no system for a vetting period with teacher input or with coordinators. It was pretty much a person making keys based on what those tests were. There weren't even online tests at that time. So really, as you're revitalizing this plan within your district, how are you going to communicate that out? I took this from one of our Google's, like Google spreadsheets, and just kind of formatted it so you guys could see. This is a sample of a bio test that was sent to me with our previous test in the source piece over here, and then with our edit request in this far right side, showing you where we changed. In this case, a lot of them wanted to use those supports we already had, but you can see a couple down here where it says like, hey, can we add this picture here? Can we change this? Can we define this here? This is a 2016 question, so we have no supports built in already. So we had that kind of expert feedback of, I really want this defined or this defined, and then kind of looking for those other pieces. This is what I take to create the test in Eduphoria. So I get things like this and create those tests, or if it's based on a previous test, sometimes I just tweak those tests in Eduphoria. But this is kind of what we use as that initial feedback within where are we creating the test, and then kind of where are we utilizing those supports before we ever kind of really get into Eduphoria and start doing this. Give you guys about 20 seconds on this part, just for any questions we have so far about the prep and the planning. So before you actually jump into Eduphoria, and the prep and the planning beforehand. So are there any questions really before we jump into that?
While people are typing into the chat to communicate those questions, we did have one come in right as we transitioned about reminding people where they can access those guidelines that you provided on the slides.
Oh yeah, those are from TEA. So those are directly from TEA guidelines on content and language supports, and that's how we pulled those up. So if you go to the TEA website and you look at those content language supports, you'll have, I believe it's like a PDF that you can print off. And that's kind of where we started. That was what we initially received from TEA, as like when we asked for, how do you create these, or what are your guidelines? They sent us to that, which really tells you a definition of what they are, not how you use your content to create them, which is what we were really looking for. So I think that is an easy one for those. Yes, absolutely. So Whitney asked a thing that said, are you willing to share these resources? Absolutely. Like I said before, I am big on as many kids that can benefit from these as possible. I don't feel like people should have to remake the wheel. So if you have questions, or you're like, hey, can you just show me where you did this or how you did this? I'm glad to kind of reach out and help for that. We had another question about your content team. So they paid extra for creating these. Our teachers are not at this point creating them. It is mainly me and our content and coordinators. However, we do pay teachers, and again, it's by choice. They have to sign up, and they have to sometimes apply to be in our curriculum writing. It takes place it used to be a week in the summer. It's changed since COVID to being online. So it's an online system that we do for 2 weeks. They're pretty much paid for 40 hours of work. And it's like we have a 2-week window that they can do those 40 hours in. And then they kind of submit that. And within that 40 hours, they are working with me for a very small portion of it, looking at assessments, but they also are looking at pacing guides, if they have new TEKs that need to come in, if they feel like there are areas of like professional development our district needs to provide, they're paid for those and their time for that. Our instructional coaches have a longer contract than our teachers do by about 2 weeks. And so usually we try to work it into their existing contract. So it's not like they're already there and they're already kind of on district time. So we are able to utilize our instructional coaches to help us to lead some of those groups. And we usually utilize them wherever they're willing and more comfortable to be. So we try to kind of feed into what our instructional coaches are, where their strengths are for that. So those are great questions. Let's jump in. And I will say real quick, and I promise you guys, Eduphoria did not pay me to say this. When we started this year, we looked, if you have been, especially if you're in assessments, you know about TFAR through TEA and Cambium. And initially I was like, this is gonna be great. We can utilize release STAR questions. They're already going to have content language supports built in and all these pieces. And when we got in there, we were extremely disappointed that they don't have their content language supports built in already. You can't just turn those on in TFAR, at least not at this point. They're very restricted on a lot of things and how you can utilize them as opposed to Eduphoria. It's not anywhere near as user-friendly when it comes to the kid side. And it's not as user-friendly when it comes to the data side. You can't do as much that we've seen with the data through TFAR that you can do with Eduphoria. And we kind of very much, and we had to go to our curriculum testing coordinators and our campus testing coordinators and tell them, like, we're not doing TFAR until it can do as good as Eduphoria, if ever. So as you're doing this, we had a question, I think that someone emailed me after that said, why aren't you just doing it through TFAR? Why even do this? And it's because it's not as good as Eduphoria, at least, not at this point at all. And that goes with the data, the testing, and the student side. So I definitely, like, if you've had people that ask about that, Eduphoria is still your way to go. And they did not pay me to say that. That is just me having looked at both and kind of played with both. Eduphoria is your best kind of bet when it comes to these. So once we have those PowerPoints, kind of how do we do Eduphoria? We're going to jump in about making it happen in Eduphoria. The first thing that you're going to do here is you have to create it with the standard assessments. It's your best bet because it has more of those tools and it has that student side. And again, have your supports ready before you're starting creating them. So you've already looked at your test, you already have an idea of what you're going to do, and you can utilize. Within Eduphoria, they have uploaded the STAR resources from 2013 to 2021 English, and they have 2015 to 2021 in Spanish. And I only know that because I've had my Spanish team use 2013 and 14, and I have to create them. So they have those and pulled those over. So they have a much bigger bank even than a lot of these other options. So we're going to walk through exactly how you do it. And I have one that I've already created. This is our sample one that I've pulled these questions in. And I have every content here, which is why I wanted to show you guys this one. And literally once I've pulled this question in from their bank, these are release STAR ones that we pulled up here. I can highlight anything that I want here and add that new clarifier. And if I have it again already ready, I'm already kind of putting that in there. This is usually about, in our testing process, I create a kind of a base test. I print out that PDF, tweak it to how I need it to look to make it more user-friendly. We let our teachers, our content coordinators, and our ICs have about close to a month to look over those and send us feedback. Hey, I want this one changed. This TEK needs to be, when the TEKs changed in science, a lot of times they got out of order. Just little feedback here and there on those before I go in and make these supports. Because if I'm making big changes, I want to wait until after that for these supports because they can be time consuming, especially for something like social studies. So once we do that, and we're kind of near the end, so about a month out from testing is when I go in and create all these. I have my content coordinators go through them on a student side and review them as a student. And that's when they kind of can go live. So once they've seen this and everything is going kind of looks good on that side, they can do that. The one difference between what it looks like in Cambium and Eduphoria is that everything that is created from pre-read to pop-up to rollover looks like a pop-up in Eduphoria. But you can still work in the same content for each one. And you can still kind of make them do kind of how you need them to be. So like these are images that they're going to pop up with. Again, this is kind of history having those built-in images. And it's completing that graphic organizer. We're going to skip down to a different content here. So this is a science one. Again, when we talked about earlier about we're creating, like we already have a visual here, and the science pop-ups created separate visual that changes what that looks like depending on what those answer choices are. So you can see here where it has those specific ones. And then let's pop down to the food web ones are always my favorite because they show your entire food web, but now you can see here the mountain lion and the elk are in bold. So it kind of grays out and bolds the other ones. This one was one that referenced back to your, sorry, they referenced back to their periodic table, show them where their periodic table is on there as well. And then let's look at a math example. So a lot of times, especially in elementary, you'll have those place value charts here. Again, these are all ones that we created after the fact within those Eduphoria pieces. And I'm going to just jump down to that last one so you can see one thing that we do here with our reading passages, and I didn't have them kind of built in for this one so they could see, was within this reading passage, we built in those pre-reads. And currently, and I know that Emily and I have gone kind of back and forth about this, you could theoretically make your pre-read a separate resource and make it readable since they now have that ability. We have not, let me see if my reading one has this one, but what I have done is I have created a way where we kind of type it out and make it a pop-up that comes up, but within the, you can see like this is my example, I will record that onto an audio file. I'll add the audio file into that support, and that way students can have that piece read to them as well. So that's been like our one workaround for like the one little thing here. But then within this, we have these different pop-ups, and then we'll also include the pictures. When I'm going through those tests, and let me show you guys this real quick, I'm going to get those pictures because those are technically free pictures for educational use. Any other time, we're going to look at specifics on, is that a free picture for educational use? But for those, I'm going to pull those from, and I just use like a snippet tool to pull those from the TEA ones with those. And we've told them that this is kind of where we are. And they've been like, yeah, that, you know, they're available for use. So those are kind of pieces. This how-to of just how to create them and kind of the tips and tools that they've created through Eduphoria is incredibly helpful when you're in this process. So definitely bookmark that page. And then just kind of our last tips of things that we've done this and hiccups we've had and always kind of things we look at. Definitely have a way to preview this from the student side. I would even say not the preview that you see through Eduphoria. I would say assign it to a kid and go in as a kid, because we have had a couple instances, and they are rare, of like reading passages that had slight formatting off that we would not have noticed had we not gone in as a student. So just little pieces there. Definitely always check for readability for the supports. I am the queen of typos. So I definitely make sure that all of our content coordinators double check that. And just having more than one person that's looking at these tests so that you make sure you catch that. We had this issue come up with teachers when they started kind of trying to branch out and create their own formative assessments and pull in these supports. Make sure you use free images. That's super easy if you're using like Google or something to Google free picture or free image and then put whatever you need, so that you make sure it's images that aren't copyright protected and can be utilized for educational purposes. Again, including teachers somewhere in your process or throughout your process is so powerful and really creates that buy-in. We've had more teachers being more comfortable with online testing this year, really in large part because of the creation of these and because of that communication and including them in that, seeing that process. And then again, like I talked to you guys earlier about that data view, usage view, is incredibly powerful to show your especially your campuses where you have campuses saying, oh yeah, so many of our kids have that, but are they using it? And is that impacting your data? Or looking at campuses that are really gung-ho and doing it really, really well, and campuses that are struggling or resistant, and saying, look at how much they're using it, look at what it's doing to their data versus, we have like your campus isn't even doing online testing. So we know their kids aren't using it. So just pulling those pieces of how many kids on your campus are using them, how much are they being used, and what does that mean for your scores? It's a huge game changer, especially in your sub-pops that are eligible for these supports, like your Ls, your SPED groups, or your 504 groups. Okay, that is all for me. The one piece I wanted to that I know that Emily added on here was looking at the scoring rules for assessments for next and the interactive question cards with those new item types that are coming. These guys, and I've told Emily this before, we are super excited about these. I'm creating a team this summer that's going to literally take release star questions and make them into these different types of item types for your contents. So I think these are going to be super powerful. And then there's my contact information. So if you guys do want some support, if you want some more resources than what we're going to share out, please feel free to contact me. And anything that y'all need, I'm happy to share. Again, the more kids that we can get to benefit from these, to me, the better. I don't buy into that we've lost years with these kids. I think these kids are more resilient than our lawmakers are giving them credit for. So I definitely think the more widespread we can get these, we can show that. Tara and Emily, did y'all have anything y'all need to add?
No, we did have a couple of questions come in.
Okay.
If you want me to roll through, we had some good ones come in.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so let me scroll back up. Give me a second. Let's see. Okay, one of them that I really liked said, it's been mentioned that the curriculum team and your department work to build these into assessments. How do your departments overseeing special populations factor into this process? It's a great question.
That's such a great question. So I do want to give a shout out. When we first started this process, Pflugerville ISD, which is north of Austin, did a great job of sharing. They have different departments that create almost different versions of their assessments through Eduphoria for these. That wasn't feasible for us because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's creating the assessments in Eduphoria. And I just could not create 4 different versions of one assessment. So what we kind of pulled in was we have a SPED district team, our 504 team, and then our bilingual team, and just made them a part of advocating with teachers, identifying who we felt like those expert teachers would be. And then also we would run a lot of this training. We did a lot of training through the teachers and instructional coaches within those, and kind of shared that within those departments. So they kind of had a piece of it where they were kind of a part of that pie. They have not, and this is just really because of their scheduling and their, we only have 3 in special education instructional coaches for our district. So there's just, there's 3 of them and we have 24 campuses. So they did not have a lot into the actual creation of what they are, but they were a part of our kind of training process. They're always a part of our curriculum writing as just kind of our reference people. And they're kind of like a part of just the different teams. And we pulled them in based again on what their specialties were as well. So we had one that's specifically with math, and she worked with our elementary math. Our bilingual have been so powerfully important, especially when we get readings that are like a 2014 SLAR passage that we have to create those supports from scratch. So they've been incredibly powerful in working with me to create those and that kind of role. So they've been a part of that creation process on that side, kind of before it gets to the Eduphoria piece.
Great. Okay, another one came in and it was regarding reading passages. So they saw that you were highlighting and providing content clarifiers on reading passages. And they mentioned that right now that they're attaching theirs as a PDF. So will you just talk about how you build a passage?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had this conversation with Tara a couple weeks ago. So the best way that I found to build passages is to create a table. So let me take you real quick and I'm going to show you guys just one of mine. And I will show you what a passage looks like. Oh, sorry, wrong window. I'll show you guys just what a passage looks like on our side. So in Eduphoria, and I'm going to take you to one of like our district passages. Just did some of these. And you'll see also how we do these pre-reads. So I'll have my pre-read attached here. There's my little audio file that they can hit play on. And then in here, I have this just kind of built in to start. But once I get into my actual passage, I have a couple of kind of big pieces. I create a table to make it have those 1, 2, 3, and 4 and everything except your revising and editing passages. Those I just kind of type in there, or I pull in what Eduphoria is already typed in there. I always make sure that my width here in my table properties is 1,000 because it makes it better formatted for your online test. Keep in mind though, when you do the 1,000, it will not print right on the PDF. So you do have to, like I said, reformat the PDFs if you're going to utilize those for anything. Usually if we're using STAR passages, I pull those over from STAR and just have that passage in a PDF. But I pull them in directly from Eduphoria here because that's the only way you can add those supports. You cannot add those supports to an image, which is what it pulls in the PDF to be like. So the only way you can add those supports is if you pull them in through that and create them like this, where you create them from scratch. So again, if I have that STAR up, I'm using snippet or I'm pulling this in from any kind of images they have within their passages. If you look, and this was something that Tara and I talked about that teachers at first talked about with the online test, was if you had a picture like this, and in the PDF, it was off to the side of the paragraph, you're going to initially have teachers that are like, why isn't it to the side? Why doesn't it look like the PDF? But if you actually have them go look at Cambium and have them go look at those practice tests, they don't look like the PDF. Their online tests are not formatted to look like a PDF. They're formatted to be an online test. And so that's kind of how we changed our dynamic in going about Eduphoria tests, is that these are going to be formatted to be your best online testing experience, not to necessarily look like that PDF. It's going to look a little different than your paper test. It's going to be formatted to be the best thing for an online test. And that's kind of how we went about that. And just, again, communicating that out. And that was how we were able to add in those pop-ups and those supports that we have in there.
Great. We had a couple others that came in. I think some of these I can help answer as well. We did have questions about attaching a reference document for students to use. And Kim mentioned that a little bit as well. And yes, that is a feature within Aware. On the general tab of every assessment, you can attach a reference document that the student can see while they're taking an online assessment. So that is currently available. We had another question come in about graphing calculators, and we do already support Desmos as our graphing calculator solution. We support both the TEA formatted Desmos and then the traditional Desmos as well. So we fit both of those needs right now. Let me see what else. I think the final ones are about online dictionary. I'm so glad that you asked, because I am in the process of digging in and researching dictionaries right now. We have identified a dictionary solution. So now it's just a matter of getting that bill paid and moving forward. So we are going to be moving forward with an online dictionary very soon. You should see that being added. So we're happy to give you that information. You're the first people to know. Go brag.
Yay.
Let's see. And then I think the rest were just asking again about resources. Oh, and then partial credit. Yes, we're going to work on scoring. TEA did release the scoring components for the new interactive questions, and we're going to start making sure that we fit the need and give you extended needs for scoring related to those new question types and any question type for that matter. So that is coming up next. Let me see if there is anything else. The other questions, go ahead, Kim, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I saw one in the Q&A that was about measuring for students. And that is, I was actually gonna say, before Emily said that, the two things that like are missing right now are the ruler and the online dictionary. For the ruler questions, what we usually utilize is we usually build in, like I will take the image that's from STAR and I will take that into like Paint. And I'll use an image of a ruler with that. It's as to what it would be. Because if you look at that teak within that, a lot of it is how they line it up, but a lot of it is really just, can they read the ruler on the lower level? So if it's a 3rd or 4th grade math question, I'm pretty much going to just put that within the image and create that within their image, because it's really just going to use that ruler to understand it. If it's a 7th grade math question, I'm going to change the question and make it ask it in a different way. Or I'm going to add in like there's a couple where they'll show them like a triangular prism, but they'll add in the measurements that should be there if they were able to use an online ruler. So it does change that kind of question and how it's worded, and it's still making them kind of go through the steps of figuring out whatever the formula is that they're trying to do as well. So those are tricky ones, and that's kind of the one piece there.
Yes, thank you for that, Kim. We get a lot of requests for online ruler, and we are still trying to navigate a solution that works on every device, that works with every picture that you've added, that works with sizing. So as you can guess, it's extremely complicated. When you have a one-shot assessment, it works beautifully, but when you have to make it work on all different types of questions and different screens, it becomes a little bit more complicated.
So
go ahead.
Go ahead, Emily.
I think we came to the end of the questions. Again, a lot of y'all just asked about, is this recorded? Is this being shared? And yes, we are going to share the recording with you. And then where you saw her resources and her chart, she's been kind enough to send me those. So when you registered, we got your email. So we will email you those resources more than likely tomorrow after we get everything ready to go. So you will have access to that. No need to worry. And we are always happy to take follow-up questions. The last piece I was going to mention again is on our previous slide. There is a link to our new interactive question guides, and they are a wonderful resource. If you want to jot down that tiny URL right now and go check those out for navigating teachers through what is this question type, what does it mean, what are scoring implications, and instructionally, what can I take away from these new question types. So we really wanted to give you a resource, and we are very proud of these. They're going to be a nice transition for teachers as we're starting to move into these new question types. So thank you again for coming and joining us today. Thank you, Kim. We are just amazed at how much work she's done, and you can see how knowledgeable she is about this content. It just rattles off, and it's amazing. So impressive. We're so thankful. And anything else, Kim, that I missed?
I don't think so that we had on our side. Again, if y'all have any questions that we didn't get to or that we missed, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any other questions for those. I will say, if you guys have a printing area in your district that you use, or somebody that does your printing for you, these different interactive question cards, we create them into posters that we're going to utilize in the spring as we move forward with these, just to use almost like gallery walks, because they're really useful to give people an idea of what's coming. So I definitely would recommend you at least kind of seeing those and kind of reaching out for that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending, and be looking for that email with resources.
Thank you guys so much.